Alrighty, so I just wanted to try and make a video to really solidify people's understanding of the actual system that we're running in today and why it's so deceptive and so fraudulent, and why we don't have a constitution here in Australia, and why Australia is part of the English Commonwealth still, and is therefore part of the English Commonwealth Constitution, and what that means for all the elders of this land, so all the traditional custodians of the land. If they could get this knowledge to them, how powerful it'll be for them securing their sovereignty, not only for themselves, but also joining forces with every other sovereign being in this land. So I'm going to start with just a recap of sovereignty, just so we can get clear on that. So let me just bring that slide up. I'm only going to focus on the first part, right? A sovereign is a monarch. Now, established monarch, mono, solo, single. Arch comes from archon, which means ruler, so a sole ruler. A single ruler who rules only the kingdom of self. Now, when I was learning through practical lawful descent, where I got a lot of this information, they always used to say that when you're a sovereign, you're above all other types of sort of free man systems, like free man on the land, because sovereignty trumps everything. And I never understood what they meant. And they'd keep saying, because we're all kings and queens in our own lands. And I'm like, what does that mean? I didn't understand what that meant. And then when I came across this definition, this made it really clear, right? So the kingdom of self is our land, right? So nothing trumps that, right? So now you've got to keep that in mind, that we are all kings and queens of our own land, which is the kingdom of self. Now, if we are kings and queens in the kingdom of self, then we are above government, right? Because we created government. So then you've got to think to yourself, well, how did government usurp, how do they go about usurping our capacity to be above them? And then we go to the Bill of Rights, right? This is really important for Australia, because the Bill of Rights happened in 1688. So this was the big honey trap that really set this off, because that was the last monarch that was, or the head of state, which they call a monarch. That was a constitutional monarch. That means kept in line with their coronation oath. I think they finished up in 1686 to memory, something like that. Anyway, 1688, the Bill of Rights pops up, and it was an act of parliament that was deceptively written to include, remember, it's an act of parliament. Remember, it's an act. What's an act, right? The whole stage, the whole world is a stage. Remember what Shakespeare wrote? And everyone's acting their part. So that's what an act of parliament is. It's just an act. It's a pantomime. That was deceptively written to include one or two constitutional libertarian sentiments to draw us in by inserting a meritorious, which means credible, paragraph. By being drawn in, right? So now we think this is actually applying to us, not us right now, but the population at the time. One is accepting and embracing the whole act. So that's what they do. They get a bit of water, they put a bit of strychnine in it, and they still call it water, without realizing that elsewhere the declaration text contained one of the most devastating weapons to the original constitutional safety mechanism. So it annihilates the safety mechanism that kept people in charge of government. That's why it's a massive deception that people got sucked into, right? So they took a bit of stuff that was true, they threw it in there, and they took out the most devastating part that made sure government could never exceed the grant of power it was given. And that is the annihilation of trial by jury and annulment by jury. Now, the 1901 Commonwealth Australia Constitution was constructed in the same fashion because it was done by the same bloodlines, right? So they never intended to make this penal colony anything else but a penal colony, right? They did the same thing. They made us believe that we were free, by putting in some things that looked like it was securing our rights, but they took away the part that made sure that we never were able to going to be in charge of government. So that's really important you get that. And why I'm saying that is, if you think back to what a sovereign is, right, king and queen owned land, this is how they did it to us, right? Now, you think about where did the convicts come from? Where did all that poverty, when the Industrial Revolution, how did that all happen? If the people were in charge of government, would they ever allow a system like that to carry on where they were going to be starving, right? So this is what's really important information for the elders of this land to understand, that this has never been dealt with that situation, right? And the Magna Carta is what will help deal with that, and will deal with that directly. So those bloodline families that are connected to those people who did it in those back then in that day are still operating today. So they're still culpable for all these actions, right? They're the ones that are pulling the strings behind all the things that you see today that you don't like, right? It's still them. This is what brings them down. And so if the traditional custodians of the land, they can get that handle on this, we all join, because there's not, they're just sovereign. Where, you know, like some people, for some reason, I hear people just calling the traditional custodians of the land sovereign. Like, we're not, we're all sovereign. So we just need to join forces as sovereigns and use, you know, an actual codified document as our weapon, because it's there to protect us. There's no other one that I'm aware of that does this. So if there's someone else who knows of another one that works as well as the Magna Carta, that's going to affect us here in Australia, feel free to come forward and let everyone know. But this is the only one I'm aware of. So that's why I'm sharing this information. Now, what I'm going to do is bring up this website. It's called Democracy Defined. So you guys can look this up for yourselves. All righty. So here it is, democracydefined.org. So you click on trial by jury, and you can scroll down and it talks about what's in the book, right? It's by Ken O'Dowd. I can't even say it. Diodney. Apologies for that. I'm not good at this. So you scroll down to here and it says Spooner's precise knowledge of Latin, law, Latin and history combines his profound comprehension of the nature of man to produce this easy to understand pure exposition on the unconstitutional means by which the trial by jury has been broken down in practice, and by whom. So you see, they knew this was what the linchpin of the whole fraud was hung up on this, right? If they could get rid of this, they could carry through their fraud. And so that's what they did. And if we understand this, that's how we get our power back, because it's through that. The predetermined dissolution of the trial by jury's intended protection of good citizens from the enforcement of unjust laws. And what they really mean by laws is legislation, not laws. They just keep confusing the words, unfortunately. Has proceeded by insidious, should I say, unlawful government manipulations. That's what we're doing. That's the same. It's the same thing happening. It's the same play happening today. It's always the same. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? So this is me bringing your attention to what's always been there that you haven't been able to see, but now I'm pointing to it, right? So now there's no excuse not to see it anymore. Spooner's comprises the definitive work of annulment by jury, right? This is the really important stuff, right? That's how we keep government accountable, right? That we decide what's going to be passing as what we call law and what's not. Of bad laws and injustices by courts, right? So we don't have courts of law. We have courts of legal and legislation. That's nothing to do with justice. That's all to do with slavery. So you can read this at your own leisure, but I'm going to read this. I'm just trying to find where I saw this is a really good one. True European and United States constitutional justice system. So most people don't know that this was going throughout the entirety of Europe at some stage. That's what we don't know, right? Trial by jury system derived from was formally adopted by all European nations. So just say that again, was formally adopted by all European nations. Wars, dictators, tyrannical monarchs and rulers imposing codes, constant political change, altering adoption, modification and rejection of diverse social theories, fascism, Marxism, socialism, communism, all have wreaked upheaval on and left Europe's peoples with little or no understanding of the purpose and form of a constitutional system which precludes the unjust intrusions and outright barbarism of statism. Alrighty. So anyone who wants to know what statism is, I've got a slide that I'm just going to pause for a moment just so I can find this slide. So just bear with me one second. All right, so here's statism, the brilliant idea that we give a small group of people the right to abduct, imprison, harass, dispossess, and kill people so we can be protected from people who abduct, harass, dispossess, and kill people. So that's what statism is. So I'll just leave that for a few more seconds just so you can have a read of that to really allow yourself to get that through your head. And now I'm going to show you the slide of what a statist is. This is all what happened as soon as they removed the trial by jury system. This is how bad our consciousness got subverted. So this is what the majority of the people believe now. A statist, one who holds the erroneous belief that there is such a thing as authority, vested in certain people, magically giving them the right to rule over other people. This authority means that a certain collective of people who we call government have the moral right to issue commands to those whom they rule, those under their jurisdiction, right? So they even invented that word so they could, subvert your consciousness even more to believe that there is such a thing as their control over you, because that's what jurisdiction is. It's like diction means word and juris means control. So spoken control. And that their subjects, which are slaves, have a moral obligation. So the constitution that we believe is ours here in Australia, we are the subjects of government in that, aka persons, right? So us as persons have a moral obligation to obey the arbitrary dictates, which they call laws, set by their masters. So they are now our masters. This is how they do it. Simply put, a statist believes in the legitimacy of slavery. So if you need any more evidence, just have a look at how quickly people just followed everything they were told. All right, so I'm just going to leave it there, and I'm going to come back with a follow-up to this one. But I just really wanted people to really get a handle on just what's been happening with this constitution we think is protecting us, which is an absolute fraud. And the sooner we understand it, the sooner we can put a stop to this entire thing. Because if we keep looking at political solutions, this is going to keep coming back and back and back, and it's never going to go away. So until we all understand how this has happened, how we've had a sovereignty usurped, because it's at the center of the whole thing. Sovereignty is the center. You need to know what it means and how you have sovereignty, and no one can take it from you. You can only relinquish it through your ignorance of knowledge. All right, that'll do for now.